Chapter 15. General Caraway. Man, that Curaga stuff is fantastic, Rinoa said, running her hands over Squall's newly repaired arm and shoulder. He had half taken off of his jacket so she could examine him. She was pretending to inspect the damage. She was actually admiring the lines of his muscles. His arms were, in fact, like spun steel. The new scar there was puckered and still slightly angry, but it was healed and the bullet wound was like a memory. Seriously, where can I get that magic? She asked, continuing to touch him liberally. His skin was rough, but she liked the texture. His muscles were hard, but his arm moved readily enough with only minimal encouragement from her. Squall was mostly ignoring her. Or trying to. He was pretending to focus on cleaning his gunblade one-handed while she indulged herself. However, his eyes were nearly crossing at the feeling of her soft hands on him. It took all of his not inconsiderable willpower to not groan, drop his head back, and beg her to keep going. It was clinical, he repeated to himself like a mantra. She was only doing it as a concerned colleague. The others were talking around them. Selfie was jumping on the hotel bed, Zell was practice sparring with Irvine in the corner. Quistis was sitting back, doing her best not to watch the way Squall was letting Rinoa touch him. He was letting her touch him. He didn't even appear to notice. Were anyone else to touch his bare skin, he would have given them a dirty look at the very least. His skin would have been cold, almost like death, thanks to Shiva. They would not at all be welcome to continue doing so. Yet he was allowing her to do it like it was nothing. Rinoa certainly noticed a chill to his skin, but it was more like he had been outside on a cool day than a freezing, icy death that would drive away others. He was looking away, letting her see his healed wound. Mostly because she wouldn't stop nagging him until he did. Only partially, and in complete denial, did he do it because he liked having her touch him. Curaga is hard magic to get a hold of, Selfie said, bouncing up and down, nearly touching the ceiling, on the bed. And use is controlled because it can have some side effects. Like what? Rinoa looked away from Squall's arm. Oh, nothing much. Necrotic skin, premature baldness, sterility, and moderate to severe brain damage. What? Rinoa grabbed for Squall. He rolled his eyes while Selfie laughed. Don't listen to her. That's not why Curaga is controlled. Rinoa let out a relieved breath. Oh, man. I actually got scared there for a second. So? Why is it controlled? Is it addicting? In a way. Squall reached down and took hold of his jacket to pull it back up. Curaga is incredibly powerful healing magic. It can pull you back from the brink of death if you're given it in time. And the euphoric sensation afterwards could be addicting. People would kill themselves to bring themselves back for the thrill. It's a thin line though, and not everyone makes it. Oh, Rinoa frowned, sitting down beside Squall. That's sad. You won't do that, right? There's no thrill in death. You don't act like you have much thrill in life either, Rinoa giggled, but she was still concerned. Whatever. Squall started loading his gun. We need to get ready. It's about time to meet at General Caraway's. He wanted us there before dark. Selfie. Yes. Continue your report. K. On the next jump, Selfie fell backwards spread eagle so her body landed supine on the bed, where she continued to bounce for a minute, grinning. So, like I was saying, not everyone is happy about the sorceress. but her approval rating is going up for some reason. It's kind of weird. I think they're just happy she's on their team. There's this sort of weary better than everyone kind of attitude here in Galbadia. So her working for them really kind of cements that belief. And the popularity is infectious. It's like herd mentality, Quistis chimed in. The more people believe, the more people start believing. Almost like a disease of some sort. She's throwing a parade and city-wide party tonight, Selfie said. Which is what I think the general wants to use as cover for our attack. It will be the easiest time to have access to her. Squall nodded, accepting that. Zell, you find any escape routes? Yeah, I've got 3 of them. One leads through the sewers. That's my least favorite, but I gotta admit it's also the least likely to be checked. And it's accessible through any manhole. Squall nodded. Then we're ready. Kineas? Are you ready? Tch! Irvine grinned cockily, giving him a look like the question was ridiculous. Quistis led the way from the room, discussing with Zell how he had come to find the escape route through the sewer in the first place. Irvine followed a step behind Selfie, not very subtly checking out her backside as he did so. Squall was right behind them, then stopped when he realized he had left Rinoa on the bed. She was sitting there, holding her weapon arm, a frown on her face. Rinoa! He called out, making her jump. Oh, sorry, she forced a smile, standing quickly. I'm coming. She didn't have to come. In fact, he was rather sure he would prefer it if she stayed here. She didn't need to get wrapped up in their missions. She smiled at him, though, as she passed into the hotel hallway. She was coming. She just followed after them like it was the most natural thing. Whatever. The assassination was being carried out from a distance anyway. He would be able to escape with her from the city immediately afterwards without anyone being the wiser. In fact, an obvious non-combatant like her might make everything easier. He said none of that. He kept to himself as the 4 of them hit the street. Rinoa stayed right beside him as he led the way through the city. Though she participated in the easygoing conversation going on behind her, she didn't leave Squall's side. What was she even doing there? Was he doing something to encourage this? It was nice to have her right there, her perfume barely tickling his nose as he watched the way her body moved with easy, light, and graceful steps. Which was exactly why she shouldn't be there. He needed to figure out what he was doing that was provoking her and stop. Before he got used to this. Rinoa's happy mood slowly faded the closer they got to General Caraway's mansion. By the time they were back in front of the money-hungry guard, she had fallen completely silent and was standing half behind Squall like she was trying to hide. Oh, you're back, the guard laughed at the sight of them. I assume you got it. 154, Squall said immediately. He didn't feel like playing games right now. 154, that's correct, the guard nodded. I'm guessing the student didn't tell you that himself. His gear did. We didn't find the student. Can't say as I expected you to. The guard shook his head. Such a tragedy. Oh, well, you've fulfilled your end. You may pass. There will be a servant inside to show you where to go. The general will be with you shortly. Don't touch anything. Squall wasn't even listening as he and the others passed. His mind was far away, thinking. Both Balam and Galbadia Garden were joining forces with the general of the Galbadian army. But why? He had worked out why General Caraway would want to fight against the sorceress that was soon to be his superior. He could even understand Galbadia Garden helping him. That garden was closely tied to the Galbadian army after all. No, what he didn't understand was why Balam was agreeing to the team-up. Seeds were notorious for not liking to be forced to work with people. For people, sure, but not really with. It was a subtle but powerful distinction for them. They should have preferred to send in a sniper seed. And Quistis was the only one of the 4 seeds that had any real length of experience. A high-profile case like this shouldn't have been given to any seeds below rank 20. Whatever. There was really no point in Squall thinking about it. Seeds aren't meant to question why, that's what they had always been told. Squall had his orders. He was only meant to follow them without clouding his duty with needless thoughts. I don't want you all to become machines. Headmaster Sid's words came back to him suddenly. With a sudden ferocity. And all Squall could think about was the garden clones. Thoughtless. Mindless. Obedient. He suddenly felt a great deal more in common with them than he ever did before. That was not at all a comfortable thought. Squall found himself stopping in front of the mansion as it hit him. Rinoa's shuffling footsteps behind him along with her soft, uncertain call, had him turning. Is my contract still in effect? She asked. Of course it was. Timber wasn't liberated yet. What did she want now? Don't leave me in this house, okay? She made a face, like her stomach hurt and the nausea was a few moments away from making her sick. Want me to explain why? Her expression wasn't one like she wanted to share. More like she felt obligated to do so if she was giving him the order. Squall knew better than anyone the desire to keep some things to yourself. He often wished some people would extend him the same courtesy. Besides, they didn't have time right now. You should know by now. Just tell us what to do and we'll do it. The relief that swept over her face was followed immediately by a bright, apologetic smile. She nodded, appreciating what he was doing by not asking. Okay, then. Thanks. Squall turned to the door and knocked. It opened almost immediately by a servant who kept their face down. They nodded to him and gestured him to follow. Rinoa stayed a step behind Squall, almost holding onto his jacket. Quistis was a step behind her, staring at the way she clung onto Squall. Why wasn't he stopping her? He had never before allowed anyone to hang on to him the way he was allowing Rinoa. She was constantly beside him. He had permitted her to follow him to the tomb of the unknown king, he wasn't stopping her from coming here. Even with a contract binding them together, there was no reason for him to be this accommodating of her. It was more than infuriating. It was slightly humiliating. Quistis had always been there for him. She had never allowed herself to be weak so that she could stand beside him with pride. She had pushed herself to the absolute limits and broken records that most others never dreamed of. She knew she was beautiful, she knew she was smart, she knew she had fine tastes. She had a fan club, for crying out loud. But it was this girl. She couldn't fight without Squall's help. She had to be forced to come out from hiding behind his shadow. Sure, she was pretty, but she was also useless. And seeds were supposed to always appreciate function over form. The unfairness of it burned Quistis as she followed the two of them through the mansion. The servant led them up to the second-floor office, and the entire time Quistis had to watch as Rinoa crept closer and closer to Squall until she was practically hanging from his shoulders. The general's office was rather large, made for accommodating his immediate subordinates. There was comfortable seating in front of a desk. In a small alcove against the near wall, a statue of what appeared to be an angel held out her empty hands with a quiet look on her face. Immediately adjacent to that, for a reason Squall couldn't imagine, there were shelves built into the wall containing martini glasses all lined up in a row. There wasn't even something to drink beside them. There was literally no purpose to that wall that he could find.
"The general will be with you shortly," the maid said, bowing to them before leaving them alone in the room.
She gave Rinoa a look before she left, but no one else but her noticed. Quistis moved past the two of them and sat herself down gently on a sofa.
"Swanky,"
Zell admired as Selfie immediately went to the windows.
"How much do you think a place like this goes for?" "You can't afford it on a rank 7 salary,"
Selfie told him, laughing. Zell growled at her angrily.
"Gonna have a place like this myself one day,"
Irvine said, moving forward. He proceeded to make himself comfortable at the general's desk. He leaned back in his chair, setting his feet up on the desktop like he was right at home.
"Have you met the general before?"
Quistis asked him.
"Nope,"
he shrugged.
"Never had a reason to. But he asked for the best sharpshooter at Galbadia Garden, so of course he got me." "How many missions have you been on?"
Zell asked curiously.
"Tch,"
Irvine rolled his eyes.
"'Cause you've been on so many more than me? Isn't this your first time, Zell? I don't think you get to question me when you haven't popped your own cherry."
Zell was growling, shaking his fist at him.
"That's it. You're going down. Enough."
Squall planted himself firmly between the two men, holding out his hand and catching Zell's shoulder before he could take more than a few angry steps.
"Zell,"
Quistis snapped at him, in full instructor mode.
"You are a seed and you will conduct yourself with the proper attitude that title implies. You can't be serious."
Zell looked flabbergasted.
"This guy is the one instigatin' and I'm the one gettin' chewed out." "I am not the boss of him,"
Squall said softly, looking him directly in the eye.
"I can't stop what he's doing. I am, however, the boss of you, and you will stop what you're doing."
"Squall,
come on."
Zell jerked back.
"This ain't even right." "It is what it is,"
Squall said firmly.
"Go over there."
"But..."
"Now."
Squall didn't raise his voice, but he didn't have to. The command was firm without the need for volume and the look in his eyes was hard as steel. Zell scoffed but turned to obey. He started shadow boxing to work off his angry energy. Rinoa stared at him. He caught her eye and stared back for a moment. He was a hard leader, but he was effective. Zell needed a firm hand to control his temper and Squall knew just how firm of a hand to apply to get him to move. And he hadn't needed to threaten him or hurt him. That was how a proper leader behaved. Squall looked away and Rinoa let out a breath she didn't realize she had been holding. Squall was always just on. That intense look in his stormy grey eyes made her quiver just a little bit inside. She couldn't help but wonder how his eyes would look in a darkened bedroom. That sculpted body held over hers, his bangs falling into his face, a light sheen of sweat covering him as he took her into those chiseled arms of his and. "Whoa, girl. Slow down. You have absolutely nowhere to take this. There is a mission to be seen to, and fantasizing about whether Squall would be a better gentle or rough lover helped no one. She cleared her throat out and shook her head, catching everyone's attention. Oops. Think of something. Fast.
Humph.
Rinoa tossed back her hair in annoyance.
He always does this. So discourteous. Making people wait around. I'm gonna go complain. Everyone just wait here.
Then, with all the regality of an empress, she stepped from the room. It wasn't until she had taken a few steps into the hallway that she decided to just come out and admit it. They were going to find out sooner or later anyway, and she would rather it be on her terms than his. She turned on her heel and walked into the room again, her back ramrod straight.
By the way, this is my house. So don't worry about a thing and make yourself at home.
She turned back and walked out with full confidence, leaving behind everyone with open mouths after dropping that bombshell. At least now she wouldn't have to field questions. For a little while. She turned left, heading for that man's room where she imagined he would be working because he was always working in either his office or his bedroom. Rinoa had very few memories of him when he wasn't working. She didn't even look right. So she completely missed the man standing there, staring after her. Waiting for her to leave that room and turn left just like he knew she would.
This is her what?
Selfie asked from inside.
What the hell's going on?
Zell shook his head, looking to Squall. He resisted the urge to sigh. He was right. She just oozed difficulty. At least now he had an inkling about why she didn't want to be left here. Damn. Footsteps had him blinking and focusing again as a man walked inside, shutting the door firmly behind him. General Caraway had been a handsome young man, and time had done little to take away from those good looks. The salt and pepper state of his originally raven black hair, that Rinoa had clearly inherited, made him look distinguished. The lines on his face made him look wise and strong. He carried himself with the air of a man who was well aware of his station and his power and was quite comfortable with both. His eyes scanned over the gathered group before him, his expression carefully masking anything he might be feeling. His gaze fell on Squall and the two of them sized each other up with very similar looks on their faces. Both men found the other to be lacking something, and possessing of something much greater in its place. Squall found it to be a little too coincidental that he would come in only moments after Rinoa had stepped out.
Where's Rinoa?
Squall asked, breaking the silence first. Quistis threw him a look as her heart broke just slightly. She was his first priority here. Not recognizing the general's rank or right to command him or even introducing himself. That hurt. So much more than she would have imagined. General Caraway held his wrist behind his back, adopting the comfortable military position with ease and familiarity. His voice, when he spoke, was soft but strong. Understated, yet somehow with the ability to carry throughout the room.
She has not received the type of training you all have, and she may become a burden. It's for the best that she stays out of this operation.
That look in his eyes. It wasn't quite caring nor was it dismissive. Squall felt strangely like he knew exactly what the general was saying though. In his own way, however misguided, he was being protective. But Rinoa wouldn't stay out this because she was told. She was far too headstrong for that. Which meant that he must have taken steps to keep her out of it. In which case, Squall had the nasty feeling that he was going to need to bust her out of this mansion. Oh, he seriously hoped not. He really hated breaking and entering. He would rather just have her here right now and not need worry about it later. Before he could repeat his question, Selfie spoke up.
So you're Rinoa's father?
She asked, tilting her head to look at him. Aside from hair color, Rinoa had inherited nothing from him. General Caraway's face was all hard angles with a strong chin and unforgiving eyes. General Caraway looked at Selfie like she had spoken an alien language.
I can't remember the last time she called me that. So, the father's a top military officer,
Zell frowned,
and the daughter is a member of an anti-government resistance faction? That's bad. Really bad.
General Caraway moved over to the window, not responding at first. Squall wondered if Zell's words had affected him. He continued to stand in rest position, his eyes guarded.
Yes, indeed. It's a serious problem.
He turned back as Squall came in close and gave him a bone-chilling glance that would have worked on a lesser man.
But it doesn't concern you. It's our problem. Focus on your job. Rinoa is none of your concern.
That wasn't true.
Besides, we have far more important things to worry about,
the general continued, clearly forcing a subject change from the sensitive topic. Garden's directive and Rinoa's orders had the same value to Squall, to the seeds. It didn't matter who they were or why. The fact remained that Squall was under contract to both of them. And, regardless of the amount paid or the reasons why, they were equal in his eyes. And as soon as his contract to Caraway was fulfilled, Rinoa would be the singular, most important thing in Squall's life again. His entire purpose would be to serve her. Such was the life of a seed.
Once our mission is accomplished here, we're working for Rinoa, as per our contract,
Squall informed him in nearly the same voice he had been spoken to.
I don't know what your situation is, and I don't care either. However, please don't interfere when the time comes.
General Caraway tilted his head slightly, like Squall was an interesting puzzle.
And if I do?
He asked, quite calm. The air around Squall chilled considerably as Shiva reacted to his words and the veiled threat behind them. Squall didn't care for them either. He was finding himself disliking this general. Not because he was threatening him, but because he was so damn familiar. He reminded Squall of himself. And damn if that wasn't a terrible thought.
We're all seeds here,
Squall returned, his voice just as calm though considerably more icy than the general's had been.
We'll act accordingly.
The threat, slightly less veiled than the general's, brought the others to their feet. He hadn't meant to invoke a response in them, he had slipped into the plural we only to avoid saying I and letting the general learn the implications of that singular change. Not that he need have bothered. The possessive, frosty anger around Squall spoke for itself beyond the plural or singular noun usage. Caraway and Squall were deadlocked, staring at each other with eyes that were at once distant and threatening. Tensions rose in the room between the two men. Quistis's eyes moved between them. Now Squall was standing up to a high-ranked client for her. This wasn't normal for him. This was definitely not something that Squall would do. Unless he...
Hey, fellas.
The carefree, mocking voice from the general's desk had the others turning to see Irvine waving at them. Squall and Caraway remained glaring.
We're here to knock off the sorceress, right?
Irvine asked, grinning.
So let's get down to business.
His words didn't have an immediate effect. Neither man was inclined to move and be the first to look away. the first to show weakness. The air temperature was getting ever lower around Squall, and Caraway could feel his skin breaking out into goose flesh despite himself. Such dark, lifeless eyes. General Caraway had looked into the eyes of many such men during his long term as a military man. Those were the eyes of men who had nothing to live for and therefore nothing to lose. There was no man more dangerous because there was no man more worthless. When you had nothing, you weren't scared of losing even your life. How could his Rinoa have possibly found herself attached to this seed? A contract was well and good, but he had seen with his own eyes the way she had clung close to him on her way up here. She had felt uncomfortable in this house and her reaction had been to become closer to this man. She hated him for his distance, yet she prized it in this mercenary. He would be damned if he was going to let this one have her. But business came first.
Okay,
he said, looking away.
Let me explain the plan. Follow me.
He walked away from Squall, away from the air that was icing around him, and tried not to be disturbed by the way the air was literally icing. He knew that power had to come from a GF, but it was no less disturbing to see. Squall wanted to demand to know where Rinoa was again, but he decided to leave it at this for now. He could always come get her back later. For now, he had a job to do. Squall and the others followed General Caraway outside of his mansion. The streets had been cleared out by Galbadian soldiers. The general populace forced to abandon the town in order to prepare for the night's festivities. The only reason they were allowed to walk about was because they were with the general. Meaning no one but the general's men would see them moving around tonight.
I'm sure you know about the Galbadian government reaching an agreement with sorceress Edia,
the general started immediately as they hit the streets. So the sorceress's name was Edia. Edia. Why did that sound so familiar?
President Delling has made her the official Galbadian ambassador to the world,
Caraway continued, his voice sad.
Which, I fear, is the beginning of the end for us. She has risen to a rank just beneath the president himself, and I fear that Galbadia is completely at her mercy. This country is now merely a tool for her. Fear of the sorceress powers won't force the world to bow to Galbadia, as Delling thinks it will. No. The rest of the world will unite against us. And I fear it will be the sorceress war all over again.
He sighed at the memories.
You all will be too young to remember that war. It was begun in very much the same way. A sorceress rose to power thanks to a foolish monarch's dreams of domination. And death will fall over the land just the same. It was over 20 years ago now that it began. I was a colonel then and I fought on the front lines. Esthar was the country that sorceress ruled and she brought untold destruction. Now, I fear, the same thing is happening to Galbadia. How foolish of you, Delling.
Caraway trailed off as his memories took off with him. Memories of a war that left wives without husbands, children without parents. Entire cities burned to ashes. And a young colonel whose succession to power had been slicked by the blood of each superior he had been forced to watch die on that battlefield. No. He was not going to let that happen again. He refused to allow his country, the precious Galbadia he had given up everything for, to follow that road to ruin. And he absolutely refused to allow his daughter, his only family, see a world stained by blood and violence. He shook his head slightly, pulling himself from his reverie. The only way to prevent the past from repeating here in the future was to commence with this rather unpleasant task.
There is going to be a ceremony tonight, to commemorate her ascension,
Caraway continued, speaking as though she had taken a crown of some sort. She might as well have. the group hit the main streets of the city. Not even the buses were running right now. The general had effectively cleared out everything. Because the sorceress had ordered him to oversee them, nothing would go wrong with the festival preparations.
The ceremony is being held at the presidential residence,
he told them, pointing to the large, ornate building they were walking towards. The large, digital clock that looked out over the whole of Deling City emerged from that building.
During the ceremony, you will split up into 2 teams and get into position. The first team, the Gateway team, will enter into that structure there. The Arc of Triumph, built to honor those lost in the Sorceress War and the victory we eventually achieved. See those spikes there? That's the bottom of the portcullis. It has a twin on the other side. It's meant to be purely decorative, but it's still an iron gate and we're going to use that to our advantage. The Gateway team is to stand by in that structure. The second team, the Sniper team, will be on standby in front of the presidential residence until the ceremony is over so they can move easily. Here, right here. This is where the Sniper team will be waiting. Right where I'm standing.
General Caraway turned to look at them at the position he was marking with his body. Far enough away from the gates to the presidential residence not to be suspicious but close enough that they could move in quickly when the time came. 2 teams. Sniper and Gateway. Seemed easy enough so far. Squall did so enjoy a plan that was simple to execute. It made it less likely to go wrong.
See the clock?
Caraway pointed, turning all their heads.
It's the crowning jewel of the presidential residence. Once the ceremony there ends, a parade for the sorceress will begin. They're going to be coming right through those gates and that's the only time they'll be opened. You must lay low until then. The parade may be cancelled if there is a commotion. We must avoid that at all costs. You won't get a second opportunity to enter the residence.
General Caraway stepped into their field of view, catching their attention again.
Once the gate opens, the Sniper team will move out. With the parade drawing the crowd and guards' attention, it should be rather easy to sneak inside. You will head for the roof of the residence. See the podium? There's a path there that leads inside to where the sorceress is staying. You don't need to worry about that though. What you need is the hatch in the corridor. It's the service hatch leading to the clock tower. The carousel clock where the hologram machines are. You'll find the sniper rifle there. I've already hidden it, so you need not worry about that. Once you arrive, the sniper team will be on standby again until exactly 20 o'clock.
General Caraway stopped in front of the gates then ran. He was rather fast for a man his age. Agile as well. He jogged to the left, calling out to them as he did so.
The parade will begin by the gate. The sorceress will be riding on a parade vehicle, in pride of place. After it leaves the gate, the vehicle will turn left. Like this. This way. The parade will circle once around the city along the outer road.
He didn't run the entire length, he reached the end of the wide street and pointed around. Then he turned and ran back, passing the gates, and moving to the other side. He turned again and once more jogged, mimicking the parade.
It will return on this side. Then it will turn left again, and head this way.
Still demonstrating, he turned and began jogging up the streets, towards the arc.
Here's where the gateway team comes into play.
Caraway slowed to a walk by the seats, indicating with his finger that they should follow him. He was slightly winded from his jog, but he didn't appear to be overly tired. For his age, he was in great shape and the short run had barely been exercise.
At exactly 20 o'clock, the parade will pass under this gateway. It's being timed so that the parade will be passing as the carousel clock rises to give more of a theatrical experience. However, it is at this point that the gateway team will act. You will operate the portcullis console within to drop the gates at the same moment. The sorceress will be trapped inside and the carousel clock will be rising, bringing the sniper team up with it. Once you are at the zenith, there will be no obstruction between the sniper and the sorceress. Take the open shot.
Bang, he finished, turning to them. The Seeds and Irvine were looking at him with varying emotions on their face, from Squall and Irvine's distance to Selfie and Zell's excitement. Quistis was in instructor/seed mode and looked like she was simply absorbing everything that was being said.
That is all,
General Caraway nodded to them once.
Now all we can do is wait. You're free to go anywhere. Go check out the city if you wish. We have excellent dining opportunities. Likely you won't get to experience them again for some time after tonight. Just one thing, stay out of trouble. We cannot afford any of you causing a scene and being detained.
Who exactly did he think he was talking to? They were highly trained specialists, literally designed for this kind of work. They weren't like his daughter. Headstrong and too inclined to speak their mind at the wrong time. Well, Zell was, but Squall was holding him on a tight leash.
We are Seeds,
Squall said, figuring that alone would explain it best. General Caraway continued to look at him like he was a puzzle to be figured out. Squall did not at all like that look. He didn't want to be figured out. He was starting to understand more and more why Rinoa had distanced herself from this man. And was subsequently getting more and more confused about why she was so attached to him. He would never understand women.
Report to my residence by no later than 19 o'clock,
the general told them at last.
We'll hold a final meeting then. After that, we'll proceed with the operation. And Rinoa?
Squall asked immediately before the general could do more than take a single step away.
You're awfully concerned with her,
came the calm reply.
It's my job to be. What about her? What about her? I told you, she has nothing to do with this. I'm actually disappointed that you've brought her with you. Your headmaster shall be hearing of this.
The threat fell on deaf ears. Squall didn't rightfully care. The worst that would happen for such an offense would be a demotion of rank. And, honestly, he was just following orders. His dedication to them might actually raise him in rank instead. Squall watched him go, his arms crossed, as the others talked behind him about their mission. He didn't really care at this moment. He was wondering if he should go back and break Rinoa out of the mansion now or later. The general wasn't wrong though. She had nothing to do with this. And she would be safer there. And Squall had promised to bring her somewhere safe. But he meant Balam Garden. He didn't mean to trap her in a house she clearly despised. He wanted her in his garden where an entire army of seeds could act as a barrier for her. No one could break into Balam Garden without bringing their military. He could not make the same promise about a mansion protected by a single, greedy guard and a wall short enough to vault over. He would allow her to stay for now. When the others were evacuating after the assassination, he would go back for her. He'd scale the outer walls and break through her window if he had to. Then he would steal her away to Balam as he had intended in the first place. End of chapter.